The Ricoh GR4 is probably the best GR that Ricoh has ever made. The hardest part though is that it's also the hardest GR upgrade to justify. I was lucky enough to get a loaner from Ricoh, specifically the Ricoh GR4 HDF, and during those 5 weeks of shooting with it, I really got familiar with how it works. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 things that I love about the GR4 as well as 5 things that I hate. So the first thing that I love that I didn't know that I would love is just the removal of the rear wheel. So bringing a dedicated exposure compensation dial as well as a D-pad and removing the rear wheel. So basically the weakest link of the GR3 series, the GR3 and the GR3X, was that little scroll circle wheel that was around some of the function commands because it serves as a D-pad, but it was actually probably the least reliable part, like the part that was most likely to break. And then it pretty much rendered sometimes the camera useless because you couldn't navigate around the menu system at all. So instead, they gave a dedicated exposure compensation control as well as a D-pad. And I think overall, it does improve the ergonomics and kind of like the user interface of the entire camera. And again, it removes the most failure-prone part of the GR3 series. So that is a major reliability improvement because I've heard a lot of people who had to get rid of their Ricohs because of the scroll wheel just breaking on them. The next thing that I love about the GR4 is just the slew of performance improvements. It has faster autofocus, a faster boot up time, the lens opens and retracts in a faster manner. The battery is larger, so you get more shots. There's a small resolution bump. And I think the biggest improvement for me was, having more internal storage because all the cameras that I use at this point have internal storage like the M11P and the Hasselblad X2D2. So having a Ricoh GR that also has more internal storage instead of just like the 40 or so shots that the GR3 and the GR3X had was very welcome. And I think just overall, the camera does feel more responsive. I think that happens with a newer processor and just better battery and stuff like that. And all these small improvements do add up to making it feel just like more refined iteration of the Ricoh GR. Because I am a JPEG film simulation straight out of camera JPEG shooter, I love that there are now 3 custom film slots. So before there was only just custom 1, custom 2, and I usually have that to my color negative film simulation recipe as well as my monotone standard film simulation recipe, but now there's a 3rd slot. So I started developing a 3rd film simulation recipe. So I was really excited about that. For someone who doesn't use U1, U2, and U3 for storing film simulations, I use those to store different types of camera configurations, specifically my minimum shutter speed for auto ISO. Having the custom 1, custom 2, and custom 3 is basically a 33% improvement or whatever you want to say in the percentage, but it increases that, option for you. So that again is an awesome win for us straight out of camera shooters. The next thing that I love about the Ricoh GR4 is the new film simulation. It's called Cinema Green. They have a couple other ones, I think Cinema Yellow, but Cinema Green is something that I really like because it has just that like filmic look. I think it's supposed to be based off of something like 800T, like Cinestill 800T for more of a cooler tone. But yeah, it really gives a distinct look. In comparison to negative film and positive film, which are more kind of like natural looking film simulations. So I had a lot of fun creating a new film simulation recipe based on Cinema Green that I will be releasing soon. So if you want to check it out, early access before the public unveiling, check out the link below for that recipe. But yeah, it's a profile that I've really gravitated to because it comes out and just like looks really raw and film forward. Similar to Reggie's Superia on Fujifilm, I think that was the inspiration for me to use this film simulation was because everybody wanted something as a Ricoh version of Reggie's Superia. So I think this recipe is something not exactly the same, but it serves the same purpose. So I'm really excited about that. And the last thing that I love about the Ricoh GR4 that makes this new film simulation recipe that I'm working on possible is that there is grain in the color film simulations. Before, the grain was only in the black and white film simulations, but now it's on the color. So I actually am revamping my Reggie's color negative to have, a little bit of moderate grain. And this new recipe that I'm working on based on Cinema Green has a lot of grain, similar to Reggie's Superior. So it's very, very heavy. Also, the grain is more adjustable. It has 2 different parameters where on the Ricoh GR3 series for the black and white, it was only just like one parameter. And I feel like this overall just matures kind of like the JPEG film simulation system straight out of camera more. You can just completely finish off the photo for the final look. Sometimes here and there you're going to adjust the exposure or the white balance, but now that the grain is in there, I feel like it's just a complete package similar to Fujifilm. And I think, negative film and the cinema green and even the positive film, which I'm starting to grow on me, just has a more kind of like mature feeling film simulation look as opposed to the Fujifilm ones, which are a little bit too low contrast for me. But in general, having this grain really encourages me to shoot JPEG a lot more on this camera because it just feels like it has more of a vintage nostalgic type look when you put very heavy grain, which you can see in these examples. So before I continue on to the nitty-gritty of what I hate about this camera, I wanted to thank today's video sponsor, Squarespace. I've actually been using Squarespace for over 10 years now. Their templates and an easy to use drag and drop interface make it incredibly simple to create and maintain a professional looking website that adapts to any device without any coding experience necessary. My Squarespace website was an essential part of how I built my photography business. It allowed me to showcase my portfolio, share recent work on my blog, and also receive inquiries from potential clients through a contact form. If you're one of those photographers still relying on your Instagram profile as the sole place to share your work and build your photography business, I would really consider making a website on Squarespace. You can visit squarespace.com/Reggie Ballesteros to start a 14-day free trial and also get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. All right, now onto the things that I hate. This one sounds kind of like weird, but I hate that the app, there's a new app, the GR World app, is slower than the old image sync, image transfer app that was for the GR3 and the GR3X. Like if you select more than one photo, it takes forever to transfer compared to the previous protocol that they had before. So I don't know what's going on there. I mean, there's a small bump in resolution, but not enough for it to be this much slower. So that day-to-day experience of transferring something from my phone, from my camera over to my phone, just took a big experience like dip. So yeah, that's the first thing that I don't like. The next thing that I don't like is that there is still no exposure preview on or off when using flash. So on Fujifilm, you can turn off preview exposure so that you can autofocus and do everything while using flash, because when you use flash, you purposely underexpose and the flash is going to expose. Considering that they have a dedicated flash accessory for the Ricoh, you would think they would have added this feature. I've also talked to tech reps at Ricoh to ask about this and suggest this, and they've taken that feedback, but it has not been implemented on the Ricoh GR IV despite having a flash come out with it on launch. So this makes flash a lot less seamless experience than it is with Fujifilm. It's something that I've learned to live with. There is a hack that you can do by tricking the auto ISO into a small band, but again, they should just have it be something that you don't have to create a hack to make it work with a preview off for the exposure. The next thing that I hate is it's kind of like a bittersweet thing. Like we have better autofocus, we have better battery, better startup, better ergonomics, slight resolution bump. We have, better internal storage, but I feel like all these things feel like it's just a small evolution considering that we've been waiting so long for a new version. But the fact that we have to make it a lot bigger in price bump just to get these small comforts is just a letdown a little bit. I think it would have been a lot more welcome if the price just wasn't as big of a jump. Which brings me on to the next thing, is that I hate the fact that this is a harder camera to recommend to beginners. Before, the GR3 was very close to $1,000, and sometimes you can find it under $1,000. Now it's well comfortably over $1,000, and this GR4 HDF, that's like almost $1,500. Plus tax, it comes out to like $1,700. That's an expensive camera to ask a beginner to get, to recommend to a beginner. And it's just tougher to have an entry point into GR system, because now you're not buying a $1,000 camera, you're buying almost a $2,000 camera. And I get that most of the other competition is at this price point. Like if you get an XM5 with a good lens, it's going to be around the price of the GR4. But I think the GR's appeal used to be that it was an accessible, attainable camera. If you could find one in stock. Now it's like the price is like way too high, I think, for me to comfortably recommend to a beginner. And I think the last thing that I hate is that this is just a hard upgrade recommendation that I can make for existing GR3 and GR3X owners, because sure, the biggest issues with the camera, which is generally the scroll wheel have gone away. There are things that you can get that are improvements that I've talked about. It's the best GR ever made, sure, but it's also the toughest GR upgrade to justify if I'm going to tell somebody to sell their GR and spend $500 more to get a new film simulation and small upgrades here and there. But if it's something you know for sure that you want, right? If you know you want the new film simulation and grain and all the better battery and all that stuff for a 500 upgrade, and that's something you want, then of course that's easy. But I think I have a GR3X and I'm not going to sell that camera. I don't think I'm going to upgrade that for a GR4X. So now I'm going to keep it. So potentially I'll have a GR4 and then a GR3X, but I'm willingly spending more money on it because I've tried out cinema green and have the grain, and I like all these things. Honestly, I think most GR3 owners can just continue making incredible photos with the camera that they already have and just pretend they don't know about these new features because they've already figured out how to live with the slower autofocus, the smaller battery. It's a hard sell for me to recommend an upgrade. So as a final verdict, I think if you already own a GR3 and a GR3X, and you know you're going to appreciate all the performance bumps, go for it. But if you feel like it's not worth the price, then maybe I wouldn't recommend you to upgrade. If you've never owned a GR before, this is the one that you need to get if you're going for the 28 version, because the X version is the 40mm version, which they don't have a GR4X out yet. It's the most refined GR that's out, as long as you're prepared to pay for the price. I think the one X factor in all this, release and launch cycle is that there's a GR4 monochrome. And this is a wild card because this camera can exist and coexist with any other GR color without like cannibalizing it in your kit. It's more something similar to like a Q monochrome. Again, it's a expensive camera. I think it's over $2,000, but if you're looking for a monochrome camera, you probably already know you want it. So in closing though, it's like the GR4 just fixes a lot of the little annoyances. It does introduce new life with the grain and the cinema green for someone like me who is a straight up camera JPEG shooters. So for me, I'm working on a new film simulation recipe. Unfortunately, it's only going to be out for GR4, but again, check out the link below if you want to check out early access to that recipe. Yeah, the Ricoh GR4, the best GR4 ever made, but also I think the hardest upgrade to recommend. What are your thoughts about the Ricoh GR4?